I was born in the spring of 1846 in Tennessee. My father was a farmer who owned 100 acres and worked the land with my brothers. My mother died when I was 8 years old in 1854 from childbed fever after my youngest brother was born. The baby passed away 3 days later. My father never married again. He raised the 4 of us who survived, 3 boys and me, with help from his sister who came to live with us. I met my husband when I was 16 years old in 1862. His name was Robert Fletcher. He was 24 and came from a family in the next county. He came to our farm to buy horses from my father. I was in the yard when he arrived, feeding the chickens. He smiled at me and said I was pretty. I had never been called pretty before. My aunt used to say I was plain, that I should be thankful if any man wished to marry me. So when Robert Fletcher told me I was pretty, I believed him. He courted me for 3 months. He would ride over on Sundays after church. He would sit with me on the porch while my father and aunt watched from inside. He spoke about his plans of going west to make his fortune, about the chances waiting in the territories. He said he wanted a wife to go with him, someone strong and able who could endure hardship. He said I was that woman. My father did not trust him. He said Robert talked too much about what he was going to do and not enough about what he had already done. He said a man of 24 should have something to show for his years, some land, a trade, or a skill. Robert had none of these. He lived with his parents, worked on their farm when it pleased him, and spent his time dreaming about the West. But I was 16 and believed I knew better. I thought my father was being too strict, that he could not see Robert's promise the way I could. Robert was handsome and charming and said I was pretty. That was enough for me. We were married in November of 1862. My father gave his permission, but not his blessing. He said, I hope you have chosen wisely, but I fear you have not. If you ever need to come home, the door will always be open. I thought he was simply worrying too much. I did not know then that those would be the last words he would ever speak to me. Robert and I lived with his parents during the first year of our marriage. It was not a happy situation. His mother disliked having another woman in her house. His father resented Robert's laziness and said he was more of a burden than a help. Robert resented their criticism and began spending more time away from the farm. He would ride into town and be gone for days at a time. Our first child, a daughter we named Mary, was born in August of 1863. I was 17 years old. Robert was not there for the birth. He had gone into town 3 days earlier and had not returned. His mother delivered the baby, barely speaking to me the entire time. When Robert finally came home a week later, he was drunk. He looked at the baby and said, "Another mouth to feed." In the spring of 1864, Robert announced that we were going to Indian Territory. He said there was land available, that the government was opening it for settlement, that we could claim our own place and build something of our own. His parents were relieved to see us go. They gave us $50 and a wagon, glad to have Robert leave. I did not wish to go. Indian Territory was dangerous, unsettled, and far from everything I had ever known. But Robert insisted. He said we would never become anything in Tennessee, that we needed a new beginning, that this was our chance. I was 18 years old with a 9-month-old baby. I had no choice but to follow my husband. We left Tennessee in April of 1864. The journey lasted 6 weeks. We traveled with 2 other families heading west, though they were bound for Kansas and we for Indian Territory. The other families thought we were foolish to travel into the territories with a baby. They were correct, but I did not say so. We reached Indian Territory in late May of 1864. Robert had papers claiming a quarter section, 160 acres in what is now Oklahoma. The land was empty prairie and scrub oak. There was no water closer than a creek 2 miles away. There were no other white settlers within 10 miles. There were Creek Indians nearby, their land joining ours. Robert said they would not trouble us. I was not so sure. We lived in the wagon for the first month, while Robert built a 1-room cabin. It was rough work, and Robert was not skilled in building. The cabin had gaps in the walls, a dirt floor, and a roof that leaked when it rained. But it was shelter of a kind, and I was thankful for even that much. The loneliness was worse than the hard labor. We were 10 miles from the nearest white settlers, 2 miles from water, surrounded by open prairie stretching in every direction. The silence felt heavy. At night, I could hear every sound, animals moving in the dark, the wind crying across the prairie, strange calls that might have been owls or something else. I lay awake, listening, wondering if we were safe, knowing in my heart that we were not. The Creek Indians passed by often during those first months, sometimes alone, sometimes in small groups. They would stop and look at our cabin and speak to one another in their language while watching us. Robert said they were only curious, that they would not disturb us, but I saw how they looked at him, with contempt for a man who could not build a proper cabin, who planted crops that failed, who did not understand how to live on the land he had claimed. I tried to be kind when Creek women passed by. I would smile and nod and offer water if they stopped. Most ignored me. A few nodded back but said nothing. They had no reason to show me kindness. I was living on land that had once been theirs, benefiting from their loss, claiming ownership of what they had been forced to give up. My presence alone was an insult, even if I had not chosen it. Our second child, a son we named Robert after his father, was born in March of 1865. I was 19 years old. The birth was hard. There was no midwife, no doctor, no woman to help me. Only Robert, who knew nothing about childbirth and was frightened by the blood in my cries. The baby came breech and small. He lived 3 days and then died. We buried him behind the cabin in ground so hard I had to help Robert dig the grave. I mourned that baby, but I had no time for long sorrow. Mary was not yet 2 years old and needed constant care. The cabin needed attention. The garden had to be planted. The chickens had to be fed. Life on the frontier did not stop for grief. That small grave behind the cabin was a constant reminder of how fragile our life was. Every time I looked out the back door, I saw the wooden cross Robert had made. Each time I walked past it to tend the garden, I remembered holding that baby for 3 days, watching him grow weaker, unable to save him. That grave represented our life in Indian territory. We were losing more than we were gaining. We were fading instead of thriving. We were in a place where children died and hope slowly withered. Robert tried farming that first year. He planted corn and beans and cleared 20 acres through harsh labor, but he had no skill for it and no patience for the slow work of tending crops. The harvest failed. There was too little rain, too many weeds, and too much discouragement. By autumn, we had gathered perhaps 1/10 of what we needed to survive the winter. I watched Robert's grand dreams fall apart as the crops failed. He had spoken proudly about building something, about making our fortune, about the great chances in the territories. But the truth was hard labor for little reward, loneliness, danger, and no clear future. He had dreamed of success but did not have the strength to endure the long years of work required to reach it. Robert began leaving at first for a day or two, riding to a trading post 30 miles away. He said he was searching for work, for chances to earn money since farming had failed. He returned with whiskey on his breath and empty pockets. He would tell me he was arranging something, that matters would improve soon. I knew he was not telling the truth. I could see it in his eyes, smell it on his clothes, hear it in the uncertainty of his words. He was not searching for work. He was running from the failure we were living, from the duty of caring for a wife and child in a dangerous land, from the truth that his dreams had led us into hardship. His absences grew longer, 3 days, then 5, then a week. I would remain alone in that cabin with Mary, isolated and afraid, waiting for him to return. The Creek Indians would pass by sometimes, stopping to look at the cabin and speaking among themselves in their language. I did not know if they meant goodwill or harm. I did not know if they would honor our claim or drive us away. I only knew I was alone with a small child in a place where I had no protection and no support. In the winter of 1866, Robert was gone for 2 weeks. When he came back, he said he had been in Arkansas working at a lumber camp. He gave me $10 and said it was all he had earned. I did not believe him. I could smell perfume on his clothes and see the signs of a man who had spent money on things other than food or tools. Our third child, another daughter we named Sarah, was born in February of 1867. I was 20 years old, 3 pregnancies in 4 years. one child buried behind the cabin, two still living, and a husband who was absent more often than present. I was tired beyond words, worn thin, and fearful of what our future would be. Robert remained home for a month after Sarah was born. He said he would improve, would work the farm, would care for us properly. He planted crops again, cleared more land, and built a lean-to for animals we did not yet own. He seemed sincere in his efforts. I allowed myself a small measure of hope, but by summer he was leaving once more, taking longer trips with unclear reasons. He said he was searching for cattle to buy, for tools we required, for chances that would better our lives. He returned each time with nothing but excuses and promises that never came true. In the autumn of 1867, several Creek Indians came to the cabin while Robert was away. There were 3 men, middle-aged, each carrying a rifle. They did not openly threaten me, yet they made it very clear that they were observing us. One of them spoke some English. He said the land where we had settled had once belonged to the Creek before the government seized it. He told me we were not welcome, that white settlers only brought trouble and sorrow. He said if we chose to remain, we should expect no assistance and no mercy if matters turned bad. When Robert returned, I told him what had happened. He brushed it aside and said the Indians were only trying to scare us, that they no longer had any claim to the land, that the government would surely protect its citizens. I did not share his confidence. We were far from any fort, too distant, too cut off, too insignificant for anyone to trouble themselves with our safety. If the Creek decided to force us away, or worse, no one would know, and no one would come. I slowly began to realize that Robert had brought us to a place where survival itself was uncertain, where we had no shelter from danger, where we depended on the mercy of the weather and of people who did not wish us there. And I also began to see that Robert did not truly care. He had brought us on a passing fancy, on a dream of cheap land and quick opportunity. And when that dream turned hard, he simply withdrew. In the spring of 1868, Robert left and never returned. He said he was traveling to Fort Smith to seek employment. He took the horse, our only one, and the $20 I had hidden inside the cabin. He promised he would be back within 2 weeks. He never came back. I waited 1 month, then another. Mary was 4 years old. Sarah was 14 months. I had no horse, no way to travel, no money, no provisions beyond what grew in the small garden, and what little I could barter for with Creek women who sometimes passed near the cabin. I wrote to my father. It required 3 months for my letter to reach him, and for his reply to return to me. He wrote that he would send money for our journey home, that he had always believed Robert was worthless, that he thanked God I had written before disaster struck. He sent $50 with a man passing through the territory who agreed to deliver it, but when the money finally arrived, it was already winter, November of 1868. It was too late in the season to attempt the long trip back to Tennessee with 2 small children. I would have to wait for spring. I spent that winter alone in the cabin with my daughters. We had enough food from the garden and from trading with Creek women who pitied our situation. We had firewood that I cut myself, though the labor drained me and I was not strong enough to gather what we truly required. We were cold much of the time, hungry often, afraid always. Before we continue, a brief word. I have released 14 complete recordings that will never appear on YouTube. These are voices too intimate, too unfiltered to share publicly. Entirely unedited, nothing removed. If you wish to hear them, the link is in the description. They are called The Lost Recordings, and your support helps us continue creating these stories. Now, back to the account. The fear I lived with was not sudden panic, but a steady dread that stayed beside me every hour of every day. I was alone in unfriendly territory, with 2 small children, no gun, no horse, no husband, no protection. If the cabin caught fire, we would perish. If one of the girls became seriously ill, we had no medicine and no doctor. If Creek men chose to drive us away or harm us, I had no way to defend us and no one to call upon for help. I lay awake at night listening to every small sound. The cabin groaned in the cold air. Animals moved outside. At times I heard voices far off, Creek people passing by, or perhaps only my mind turning wind into whispers. I would hold my breath and listen, wondering if someone would come to the door, wondering what I could possibly do if they did. The days were filled with endless work, chopping firewood with an axe too heavy for my arms to handle properly. My hands blistered, then split open, then hardened. Carrying water from the creek 2 miles away, hauling buckets that splashed and spilled, making the journey twice each day because we needed water for drinking, cooking, and washing, tending the garden where root vegetables had been buried in the soil, breaking through frozen ground to dig up carrots and turnips, caring for 2 small children who were cold and hungry and asked questions I could not answer. Mary asked about her father every single day. Where was Papa? When would Papa return? Why had Papa gone away? I told her he had work in a distant place and would come home when he was able. The lies grew easier the more I repeated them. I lied to shield her and to protect myself from saying that her father had abandoned us, that he did not love us enough to stay or to return. But Mary was only 4, not foolish. She sensed something was wrong. She knew Papa had been gone longer than before. She knew Mama was afraid. Though I tried to conceal it, she grew quiet and watchful. She began waking at night crying. She clung to me in a way she never had before. My child was learning fear at 4 years old, learning that the world was uncertain and harsh, learning that fathers leave and sometimes never return. The Creek women who assisted us saved our lives. They had no obligation to help me. I was a white woman, living on land that had once been theirs, representing what they had lost. Yet they saw a woman alone with 2 young children in winter, and simple human decency moved them to help despite every reason not to. They brought food when they had spare dried corn, preserved meat, roots, and herbs. They carried firewood when they noticed I could not cut enough. They checked on us, speaking little English, but making clear with gestures that they wished to be certain we were still alive. They asked for nothing in exchange. Their kindness was pure charity given to someone who could not repay it, and perhaps did not deserve it. I tried to thank them. I offered what little I possessed. A few eggs from our chickens, vegetables from the garden, bits of cloth I could spare. It was nothing beside what they gave. They were sustaining us through winter, keeping us alive, while I offered small tokens of little value. Yet they accepted my gifts with serious nods, perhaps understanding that I needed to give something in order to preserve my dignity. One Creek woman came often. She may have been about 40 years old and spoke a little English. She would sometimes sit with me and teach me words from her language. I never learned her name, or if I did, I have forgotten it over the years. But I remember her face and the kindness in her eyes. I remember feeling for the first time since Robert left that I was not entirely alone. She told me once, in her broken English, that white men often left their wives. She said Creek men did not behave that way, that it was shameful to abandon one's family. She said I should return to my own people, that I did not belong there. She was right, but I could not leave until my father's money came. That winter showed me what sort of people live in this world. Robert, who had promised to love and protect me, left me to face death. The Creek women, who owed me nothing and had reason to resent me, kept me alive. I learned that kindness may come from unexpected hands, and cruelty from those you trust most. That lesson has remained with me for 55 years. In February of 1869, I hired a man traveling east to take us to Tennessee. He asked $30 for the journey. I paid him from the money my father had sent. We left that cabin in Indian Territory with only what we could carry. I abandoned furniture, tools, everything too heavy for the wagon. I did not care. I wished only to leave and go home where we might be safe. The trip lasted 4 weeks. The man who drove us was rough in manner but honest in his dealings. He brought us to my father's farm in March of 1869. My father took us in without a single word of reproach. He opened the door, lifted Sarah from my arms, and said, "Welcome home." I never heard from Robert again. I never discovered where he went or what became of him. He simply disappeared, leaving me with 2 daughters, and nothing more. I lived with my father for 3 years. I worked the farm, managed accounts, cared for my girls. My father never spoke Robert's name, never said I told you so, never made me feel ashamed for my choice. He simply accepted us and made space for us in his life. In 1872, I married again. His name was Thomas Harwood, a widower with no children. He was 40 years old. I was 26. It was not a marriage of love. It was sensible and practical. He needed a wife to manage his household. I required security for myself and my daughters. We agreed upon terms and married without romance or illusion, expecting only mutual advantage. Thomas was a decent man. He was a carpenter, earned steady wages, owned his home free of debt. He treated my daughters kindly, never making them feel unwelcome. He treated me with respect, never asking more than I could give. He was everything Robert had failed to be: dependable, diligent, truthful, present. I fulfilled the duties expected of a wife. I kept his house in order, prepared his meals, repaired his clothes. I cared for his needs without complaint. I was faithful and responsible, never giving him cause to doubt my commitment. But I could not love him. Thomas understood, for he was not foolish. He could see the chill within me. He could sense the distance I kept. He knew that though I was there in body, my heart remained elsewhere, still in that cabin in Indian Territory, still waiting for Robert to return, still frozen as the instant I understood I had been forsaken. He tried at first in small ways, with gentle words, soft touches, small attempts to make me smile. Later, he tried more directly, asking what troubled me, telling me he cared, trying to break through the walls I had built around myself. But I could not allow him inside. The walls were too high, the fear too deep, the wound too lasting. I had learned in Indian Territory that giving your heart to someone placed your life in their hands. Robert had taught me that lesson completely. He had sworn to love and guard me, and then he left me to death alone. Thomas was not like Robert. He was honorable and steady and true. But the lesson I had learned was one I could never fully forget. It was not about Robert in particular. It was about trust itself, about being open, about what happens when you hand someone your heart and they crush it without mercy. So I kept my heart locked away, where Thomas could never reach it. I gave him my time, my hard work, my loyalty, but I could not give him my love, because love required trust, and trust required openness, and openness meant danger. I had learned that love was a weakness others could take advantage of, and I refused to be weak again. Thomas accepted what I was able to give him. He never complained, never asked for more, never made me feel ashamed for my coldness. Perhaps he understood that something inside me was broken beyond fixing. Perhaps he decided that a beautiful wife who kept his house and shared his name was better than no wife at all. Perhaps he hoped that time would soften me, that one day I would learn to trust him. If he hoped for that, he was disappointed. We were married 24 years, and I was as cold on the day he died as I had been on the day we wed. Time did not heal me. It only made the coldness more familiar, more rooted, more lasting. I watched Thomas with my daughters at times. He was gentle with them, in a way I could never manage. He would ask about their days, listen carefully to their worries, offer guidance and comfort. He was patient when they failed, proud when they succeeded, present in ways I was not. He taught them that men could be steady and kind. That was his gift to them, and it was worth more than anything I ever provided. But watching him with them filled me with something like sorrow, not for him, but for myself. I saw what I might have become if Robert had not left me in that lonely cabin. I might have been a warm mother, a loving wife, a woman capable of closeness and tenderness. Instead, I was ice, frozen through, unable to melt even when I wished to. Sometimes Thomas would take my hand in the evenings as we sat together, a small gesture, holding hands the way married couples do. I would allow him to hold my hand, but I felt nothing. His touch did not comfort me or warm me or make me feel cherished. It was simply his hand resting in mine, and when he let go, I felt no emptiness. That is what Robert's abandonment cost me. Not only the years of fear and poverty, not only the harm done to my daughters, but the loss of my ability to feel deeply. I survived by turning into stone, and stone does not bend. Thomas deserved a wife who could hold his hand and feel love. Instead, he had a wife who endured his touch with polite duty. He deserved far better than what I could offer. Mary grew up knowing Thomas as the man who raised her. She called him Papa, and he earned that name through years of steady care and presence. She married at 19 to a farmer's son, has 4 children, and lives 10 miles from us. She is a good mother, warm and affectionate in ways I could never be. Thomas taught her that, not me. Yet I see shadows in Mary at times. She remembers Indian Territory, though she was only 4 when we left. She remembers her true father. She remembers waiting for him to return. She remembers the fear inside that cabin. Those memories shaped her even if she does not speak of them. She holds her children too tightly. She worries too much when her husband is away. She cannot fully believe that the safety she has will last. She learned very young that fathers leave, that safety can vanish, that the world is uncertain and harsh. Robert did that to her, and I failed to shield her from it. She was 4 when her father deserted her, and that desertion has echoed through her whole life. She loves her child, Ren, fiercely, but there is fear in that love, a quiet terror that they will be taken from her, the way her father was taken from her. She cannot completely trust that her husband will remain, even though he has given her no reason to doubt him. She knows only what I told her, that her father went away when she was a baby and never returned. She married at 20 to a shopkeeper, has 3 children, and lives in town. She is practical and steady, making the best of what she has. She learned that by watching me endure. But Sarah is cold in ways Mary is not. She cares for her children properly, but without warmth. She keeps her husband's house, yet does not seem to love him. She moves through family life as if performing a duty, without appearing to feel much at all. She learned from me how to survive by closing off feeling, and she has used that lesson in her own life. I gave her an example of motherhood that was all responsibility and no tenderness, and she has copied it exactly. I watch my daughters with their families, and I see the harm I passed on. Mary carries wounds from an abandonment she barely remembers. Sarah carries coldness she learned from me. Both of them bear scars from those years in Indian Territory, from Robert's leaving, from my failure to be a warm mother afterward. The harm spreads like ripples in water, touching my daughters and through them their children. Mary's eldest daughter is 15 now. She is nervous and fearful, always worrying about what might go wrong. She learned that worry from her mother, who learned fear in that lonely cabin. 3 generations shaped by one man's choice, to ride away on a spring morning in 1868. Sarah's children are quiet and distant, lovely, but emotionally far away. They are raised by a mother who provides for them, but cannot show affection. They will grow up reserved, like their mother, like their grandmother, like the legacy Robert Fletcher left behind when he deserted his family. I never intended to harm my daughters. I loved them as much as I was capable of loving, which was not enough. I kept them alive, fed, clothed, and protected, but I could not give them warmth or deep affection, or the sense of being truly cherished. I had none of those things left inside me. Robert burned them away when he left me alone in that cabin to die. Thomas died in 1896. He was 64. I was 50. We had been married 24 years. He died of a heart illness that troubled him in his final years. I mourned him the way one mourns a loyal friend rather than a beloved husband. He deserved more, but I had nothing else to give. I am 77 years old now. It has been 55 years since Robert left me in that cabin in Indian Territory. 55 years since he took our horse and my hidden savings and simply rode away, leaving me alone with 2 small children in a dangerous land with no support. I have thought of him every day for 55 years, not with love that died long ago, not even with hatred, though I hated him fiercely for many years. Now I think of him with cold thought, trying to understand what kind of man leaves his wife and children in the wilderness and feels no duty to return. Robert was 28 when he left. If he still lives, he would be 82, though I believe he is dead. Men like Robert rarely reach old age. They drink heavily, gamble foolishly, take reckless chances, and meet violent ends. I hope he died poorly. I hope he died alone, and afraid, and in pain the way he left me to die. But I did not die. That is what he could not have foreseen. He left believing I would not survive the winter, that the problem of his wife and children would end with my death. But I survived. I found help among the very people he claimed would never help us, the Creek women who showed kindness to me and my children. I wrote to my father and received aid. I endured that dreadful winter and left when spring arrived. I survived when Robert expected my grave. I sometimes wonder what he thought as he rode away that morning. Did he feel shame? Did he feel regret? Did he glance back at the cabin and think of his daughters inside? Did he promise himself he would send money later? That he would help from afar? That leaving was not truly leaving if he meant to provide someday? Or did he ride off without a backward look, relieved to be free of the burden we were? Did he feel only relief at escaping the failure of his dreams, moving on to a place where no one knew he had a wife and children depending on him? I will never know his thoughts, but I know his actions. He took our only horse, our only way to travel. He took the money I had hidden for safety. He left us in a dangerous land with no protection and no escape. He left us expecting we would perish, and he did not care enough to stay, to help, or to return later to see if we had lived. That is who Robert Fletcher truly was, not the charming boy who called me pretty at 16, not the dreamer who spoke of opportunity in the West, but a coward who abandoned his family rather than face his own failure. The thin line between life and death was $50 sent by a father who loved me enough to help, even after I ignored his warnings. Without that money, without the kindness of the Creek women, we would have died. But we did not. We lived. And that survival, bitter as it was, cold as it made me, stands as a victory over Robert's intent. He meant for us to die. We lived. His daughters know what their father did, and they carry that truth with them. I have lived 77 years. 55 of those years have been spent in the shadow of Robert's choice. Every relationship since then has been shaped by what he taught. Me about trust and love and vulnerability. That is the real cost of abandonment. Not only the suffering in the moment, though that was severe, but the lasting damage to the one left behind. Robert destroyed my ability to live with warmth for the rest of my life. He turned me into stone, and stone is what I have been for 55 years, and what I will remain until death. That is my victory over him. Survival, not a warm one, not a joyful one, but survival all the same. Survival, not a joyful survival, but survival all the same. I raised 2 daughters without him. I created a life without him. I married a decent man and gave him 24 years of faithful companionship, even if it was not love. I outlived Robert by many years, I am sure, and I outlived the version of myself he left behind in that cabin, the scared, deserted wife who waited for her husband to come back. But survival always has a price. I survived by turning cold, by shutting my heart, by refusing to trust or love or hope again. I survived by becoming something smaller than I once was, something hard and closed and unable to give warmth. I think about that winter in Indian Territory again and again. I remember sitting in that cabin with 2 little children, no horse, no husband, no protection. I remember the Creek women who stopped by with food, showing mercy to a white woman living on land that had once been theirs. I remember chopping firewood in the snow, my hands cracked, bleeding and numb from the cold. I remember Mary asking each day when her papa would return home. The fear of that winter changed me forever. It made me hard, because being soft meant breaking apart. It made me cold, because warmth required trust, and trust meant weakness, and weakness meant death. I became something that could live through that winter in that cabin, and I never became anything different after that. People sometimes ask why I never tried to search for Robert, why I never tried to make him answer for leaving us. The truth is, I did not wish to find him. What would have been the use? He had already made his decision. Finding him would not have given back the years I lost, or erased the fear I suffered, or repaired the harm done to my daughters. I also did not want to give him the pleasure of knowing I cared enough to look for him. He left us, expecting we would die. When we did not die, when I brought us safely out of that territory and back to Tennessee, I had already won in my own way. Looking for him would have meant he still had control over me. I would not allow that. I often think about the man who took my father's money and delivered it to me in Indian Territory. I never knew his name. He was passing through on his own business, and my father paid him to travel out of his way to bring me $50. He could have kept the money and disappeared, but he did not. He rode 2 extra days to bring money to a woman he had never met. That man saved my life and the lives of my daughters. I also think about the Creek women who brought food and checked on us during that long winter. They had no duty to help me. I was a white woman living on their land, yet they helped me anyway. They saw a mother alone with 2 small children in winter, and they brought food and wood and kept us alive. I have lived 77 years, and I have learned that kindness often comes from strangers, and cruelty often comes from those you trust the most. Robert, who promised to love and care for me, left me in the wilderness. Strangers and Indian women who owed me nothing helped me survive. I sometimes wonder what Robert told himself to excuse what he did. Did he persuade himself that I would manage, that I was strong enough to survive alone? Did he promise himself he would send money later? That he would, LD, support us from far away? That leaving was not truly leaving if he planned to provide from a distance. Did he ever truly plan to provide for us at all? Or did he simply ride away and never look back? I will never know the truth. Robert is dead now, or might as well be. He disappeared 55 years ago and left no sign behind. If he built a new life somewhere, married another woman, had more children, I know nothing about it. For me, he stopped existing the day he rode off on our horse with my money in his pocket. But his abandonment did not disappear. It stayed with me. It shaped who I became, how I raised my daughters, how I behaved with Thomas, how I have lived each day for 55 years. Robert left, but the harm he caused remained. I think about the girl I was when I married him, 16 years old, plain and thankful to be called pretty, ready to believe in a charming man who spoke of opportunities in the West. My father tried to warn me. He saw what I refused to see, that Robert was a man of talk more than work, that he dreamed more than he acted. My father understood, but I did not listen. I paid for that mistake with 4 years of struggle, with a dead child, with months of fear in Indian Territory, with 55 years of emotional coldness. That was the cost of ignoring my father's wisdom. I am 77 years old now. My daughters are grown and have children and grandchildren of their own. I live alone in a small house Thomas purchased before he died. I have enough to live on, and I am comfortable enough, but I am alone. Not only alone in body, but alone in spirit. I cannot truly connect, cannot truly love, cannot open my heart to anyone. Robert took that from me when he left me in that cabin. He took my ability to trust and love and feel warmth for another human being. Thomas tried for 24 long years. He tried to reach me, to break through the ice around my heart, to make me fey. He was patient, gentle, and steady, but he could not reach me. The wound was too deep, the walls too strong, the fear too rooted inside me. I stayed cold and closed until the day he died, and I remain that way still. My daughters visit me, but I see the distance in their eyes. They care for me because it is their duty, but there is no real warmth between us. They learned from my coldness how to protect themselves, or they learned to expect nothing from me and to move on with their own lives. Either way, what joins us is duty rather than love. I think about what my life might have been if I had chosen differently at 16, if I had listened to my father and refused Robert, if I had married a steady, dependable man instead of a charming dreamer, if I had never gone to Indian Territory, never been deserted, never lived through that winter alone with 2 small children, waiting for a husband who never returned. I might have known happiness. I might have loved my husband and been warm with my children. I might have lived a life filled with connection instead of isolation, with warmth instead of coldness, with trust instead of fear. But I did not choose another path. I chose Robert Fletcher, and that single choice shaped everything that came after. 4 years of hardship in Indian Territory, months of fear and abandonment, a second marriage without love, 55 years of emotional distance. That is the price of one wrong choice made at 16 years of age. I am 77 years old, and I am still paying for that decision. I will pay for it until my final breath. Robert left me 55 years ago, but I will never escape what he did to me. This is my testimony. This is my truth. Robert Fletcher deserted me and our daughters in Indian Territory in the spring of 1868. I have been living with the results of that desertion for 55 years. I survived, but the cost of survival was everything that made life worth living. When I die, and that day will come soon enough, my daughters will bury me beside Thomas. They will place a stone over my grave that says I was a beautiful wife and mother. They will speak gentle words about me, though they know I was not a gentle woman. They will fulfill their duty as I taught them to do. But before I die, I want this spoken clearly. I want it known what Robert Fletcher did. I want it remembered that he took a 16-year-old girl who loved him and ruined her by abandoning her in a dangerous land with 2 small children. I want it understood that his abandonment was not just a single act, but a wound that never closed, a harm that lasted 55 years and continues even now. That is his true legacy, not whatever life he may have built afterward, but what he did to me and what it cost. He made me unable to love, unable to trust, unable to feel warmth. He turned me into a cold, hard woman who survived but never truly lived. That is what abandonment does, and that is what I want remembered.